Good afternoon, Mr. Jareff. It's a pleasure talking to you about your life today. We're going to start with the early years. Where were you born?
I was born in Athens, Georgia. I was born on West Broad Street, up by the University Extension Center next to the old farmer's market in a house.
Okay. Do you know anything about who the midwife was that delivered you?
I think it was one of the Stroud ladies that delivered me.
Okay. All right. Tell me about your mom.
My mom was Hosey Daniel. That was her maiden name. She was one of 13 children. And I was the only child. At first she did maid work. And then she worked at the poultry for 52 years after that.
Where was she from?
Athens, Georgia.
Okay.
As far as I know, she was born in Athens, Georgia.
Okay.
But at the time she was a youth, they lived up what we call now Elsbridge Park, where they lived off Elsbridge Road out there during that time.
And your dad, your stepdad?
My stepdad, he was born in Jackson County, up by South Jackson. My biological father, Venus Jareff, I'm not sure where he was born, but he was the oldest of 6 kids. And originally they lived in Brooklyn too, but then they moved out Elsbridge Parkway in Oconee County in that area.
Okay. You tell me about the place where you grew up, up on where you was born, at least.
Where I was born.
Near the farmer's market. Tell me all about that place.
Okay. It was a house close. It was just a old house. We didn't have electricity nor water in the house. We had wells, sprang down the hill, outhouses, fireplace, and no lights.
Okay. And I understand it was a farm?
Yeah,
tell me about
it was like
farm.
A farm in the city, actually.
Okay.
Actually, the city limits wasn't far on the other side of the farmer's market, but we had cows, we had hogs, we had chickens, and we planted gardens. And,
so what were your jobs on there?
My first job,
as a young farm boy, I'm sure there was a lot of chores to be done.
The first job I can remember, I was about 7 years old. I had to take the cows from the top of the hill, which was by the farmer's market, to the bottom of the hill, which is now where farmers and all that was. It's a spring down there. And they ate grass and they got water. And I had to take them in the morning. And then in the afternoon, I had to go and get them.
Okay. What else did you do on the farm as chores?
Clean, help sweep the yard, which the yard wasn't any grass then. You just swept it and make it clean, the dirt part of the yard. And in my early age, that was my chores up there on that part of it.
Okay. And you mentioned about the garden. What did y'all raise in the garden?
We raised corn, we raised greens, which is collards, turnips, green beans. We raised potatoes. We raised everything. We didn't buy that.
Okay, who worked the garden?
Mostly it was my parents. Okay. My mother, my father, and my uncles and my granddad. Mostly was them working the garden.
Okay. And what did you do with the food besides eating it? And how did you preserve it?
Okay, the meats, they killed the animals, the hogs and the cows during the cold season, which was in the winter. and they would use salt to preserve them then, and they would hang them up in the smokehouse, and that would preserve them. And the other items, the vegetables and fruit, they would can.
What do you know about the smokehouse process? Do you know anything about how that works besides the salt? It's kind of like a lost art.
Right.
Yeah.
Nah, it didn't pass down to me that much. I was looking, but I didn't really get to do it.
With the smoke. I remember the salt process.
But I remember the smokehouse. But the other point is about the gardening and the killing of the animals is they share with the other people in the community. It wasn't just for us. People who didn't have, if they would swap items with other people who had different items too, whether it was meat or whether it was gardening items, but they were always shared with people in the community.
Okay. You mentioned the meats. How did they preserve the vegetables?
By canning. They would can them. Yeah. My grandmother would handle that part of it, all the ladies and my aunts.
Okay.
So
you had also your grandparents in your life when you was growing up?
Right.
Okay.
We lived with my grandmother. Yeah, go.
Tell me a little bit about them then, while we're talking about
my grandmother. Actually, I knew my great-grandmother.
Your great-grandmother. Okay.
My great-grandmother, Becky Maynard, she been married twice, and she lived off Cleveland Road. And they had land out there off Cleveland Road. And one thing I remember, we used to love to go out there and spend the weekend with her because she would cook. And then we could, during those days, you could kind of roam in the woods a lot. We stayed outside. And so, and my grandmother, Sadie Daniel, she stayed at home and she took care of the house, the chores, the cooking, the cleaning, the yard, and she took care of us. And like my grandfather, Jerry Daniel, he would go out and do the demolition, digging wells and dams, which when they built dams. And I heard that he was the only guy in Clark County at that time that had license to use dynamite and knew how to blast the rock. You know, when you digging, a lot of times you have to blast rock. And how he got that trade, I heard he had worked in West Virginia in the coal mine. And so that's why he got his credentials to do that type of work.
Okay. And your dad, you mentioned a little bit about what your mama did. What did your dad do?
My father.
Your stepfather.
Stepfather. My stepfather, he was from Jackson County, and he worked.
What kind of work? Yeah. What kind of work?
He did what we call it now. He worked yard work. He did yard work first, and then he got a job at the poultry.
Okay.
And then he worked at the poultry, and he did yard work as his part-time job.
Okay.
He did everything from cutting grass, shrubbery, cleaning gutters, to inside work like cleaning up in the house, shining the brass, and like a handyman.
Okay.
He did that. But I add that his schooling, my mother finished the 11th grade, which I was told at that time that's when high school went to the 11th grade, but she didn't finish, and I actually don't know what grade he finished. He didn't go to school that much. Up in Jackson County, they went to those road wall church schools, like Chestnut Grove have out there.
Okay.
And, but he was very business-like in that yard work. I learned a lot from him.
Okay, that's what I'm about to ask you. What life lessons did you learn from your grandparents and your parents?
I learned, my mother would always tell me about my grandfather. One of his sayings, Jerry Daniel, said that common sense will take you all over the world. But what I learned from him, he did more than one thing. In addition to that blasting, they also did sharecropping and the cotton and that stuff too. He did that too. And so, but he always did more than one thing. And my stepfather was the same way. Working at the poacher in the yard, he always did more than one thing to bring income in. And so, from what I learned from him is to work hard. That's what I learned from him. And from my grandmother and my mother and my great-grandmother, I learned that you use what you got. You know, you make the best of what you got and you use it. And from my mother, I learned how to save. My mother was a good saver too. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
As a young child, what did y'all do for fun? What kind of games did you and your friends play?
Okay. At first, we would climb trees.
Okay.
My cousin, she's like my sister. She's my age. Mm-hmm. We would climb trees. Mm-hmm. But we would hula hoop. We would make bow and arrows. We didn't have bow and arrows. We would get a stick out of the trees, some strings, and bend it, and make bow and arrows. And we would get another stick and get a Coca-Cola top and bend it, and then cut the back of it where to go in the air. We were very creative. Uh-huh. We didn't have money to buy those type toys, but we would make that. We would ride bicycles. We would. Later on, well, that was the early age, but later on, you know, bicycles, BB guns, skating.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then you moved from West Broad to Magnolia.
Right.
Tell me about the Magnolia community.
Okay, the Magnolia community was a residence. It was a family-oriented community. That's what was down there then, was family. Mm-hmm. And it was multi-type family. You had the professional people like the teachers, and it was segregated then, so it was a black neighborhood. Mm-hmm. And so most of our teachers, not most of them, but a lot of teachers lived on Magnolia, as well as a lot of common people working people lived there.
Okay. And
Magnolia was originally built for veterans who, at the end of World War I, veterans was in town and they were stationed at the Navy School along with other people, and those houses was built for, but eventually other people got to buy them too, like my parents did.
Okay.
At that time, my parents were working at the post.
Mm-hmm. What was it like as a community? Tell me about that neighborhood.
Yeah. It was neat. It was, like I said, it was a mixture of educators and residential workers. So it was the same with the youth, who grew up there. We had a lot of kids to play with. We was influenced a lot by our peers who had went on. A lot of them went to college. Some of them had been in the Army. Some of them just general workers. But we was influenced by a lot of their accomplishments. You know, we was influenced by that, but it was fun.
Okay.
We had a lot of people to play with.
Who are some of the people who live there?
Okay. The people that lived there, Miss Pounds, she was my best friend, Melvin Pounds' great-grandmama, okay. And she was a retired teacher. Miss Shelton, Mr. Holston, Mr. Jackson, Miss McCleskey. These were all teachers. Those were teachers. Right. The regular people was Miss Josephine, she was one of the teachers. It was Miss Liney Chapman. She stayed next door on one side. Miss Josephine and Mr. Larry, Miss Josephine and Mr. William Ford, who's his Reverend Ford's parents. They stayed next to the house now. Miss Jackson, Reverend Basco Jackson still live on the other end. The Paynes, the Edwards, Sampson Edwards, Will Dean, Schwab Jones,
Okay, okay,
in the neighborhood.
okay.
Robert Billups.
Tell me about when your early school.
Okay. I went to nursery school, I guess. They called it nursery school then, and Miss Eberhard's, Shirley Eberhard's aunt or grandmother or something.
And where was that?
It was on Chase Street. And then I went to West Broad Elementary School.
Okay. Tell me all about West Broad Elementary School.
Okay. I remember walking to school.
What did the building look like?
It was just one building then, and one older building. Then,
You remember anything about the classrooms?
yeah, I remember that in classes, it was kind of, well, the teacher, I remember how the teachers taught us. They were kind of section you off like if you was a fast learner or if you was another learner. But they had their different technique that they would do with each learner. And then they would get the faster learners to go